In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can build out your own Claude UI inspired chatbot in Next.JS. So I'm going to be leveraging Langchain for a ton of features in its core, and I'm going to be showing you how you can incorporate the front end to the back end to incorporate things like OpenAI functions, embedding documents into services like Supabase, and then I'll also be showing you on how you can use Vercel's new AI library. So if I just demonstrate it here, if I just select the ChatGPT 3.5 on the left here, we see that we have these functions that pop up. And if I just demonstrate here and I say, what is Langchain, or what Langchain, what is Langchain? So notoriously, LLMs don't know what Langchain is because they're trained on data with a lag. But if I just incorporate an OpenAI function that I wrote here, and I'll show you how to write your own custom functions with Langchain, and I now say, what is Langchain? So now with this tool, it's reaching out to Wikipedia and it's returning the result from Wikipedia, and it's informing the question that we're asking. So that's one feature. And then another thing for real-time data. So something like, let's say, what is the price of Bitcoin? And you see it can't get the price of Bitcoin, but if I say, what is the price of Bitcoin, and then I turn on that function to actually run a crypto price search, you'll see it gives me the current price. So those are just two examples. It's not really around incorporating Wikipedia or getting crypto prices per se. I'm going to show you how you can write your own functions and toggle them on and off like that. And you can put whatever API or whatever responses or actions into that you see fit. Now, the next thing that it is able to do is you are going to be able to upload a series of documents, and you'll be able to embed those documents into Supabase. So I also showed you a little bit of a component toggle switch for if you do want to incorporate other vector offerings from other companies. So this is Pinecone's logo. So if you want to build out with Pinecone, you can sort of leverage this and build off from it. So the one thing to note with this is right now, I don't have access to Claude to 100K directly through their API. So I'm still waiting on access for their core offering. Now, with that said, there is a service called OpenRouter where you can access their model right now. And so a number of users have been using that as sort of a stopgap while they wait for access. So I have a video on that I'll link in the description if you're curious on setting this up. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into the code and we're going to run through it. So I'm going to go awfully quick. Now, the one thing, if you're not following along line by line, you can just reach for the repo in the description of the video. It should be posted shortly after I put this up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to VS Code, and I'm just going to open up my separate tab here. And the first thing that you're going to have to do is just go in the .env.local, and you'll have to just chase down a couple environment variables. So you have to get your OpenAI API key, you have to get your Supabase private key and URL, and then these are optional. So if you want to use Langsmith, just paste in your values here from Langsmith, and then you'll have that tracking. And similarly, if you're not familiar with what Langsmith is, I encourage you to sign up for the preview right now. And I also have a couple videos on that, on what it is and how you can use that within a real life project, and how it really gives you like a ton of really good insight. So next, we're just going to install a handful of things. So if you check out the package.json here, so essentially if you run through this list here and you just npm ai.env, Langchain, etc., get that all set up, get all installed after you have your Next.js boilerplate set up, or if you're just grab the repo, you can just npm install all the packages from there. So the first thing I'm going to run through is actually setting up the backend. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import a handful of dependencies. So we're going to initialize our agent executor with options. So the reason we're using this is going to be how Langchain handles our OpenAI function selection. Then I'm also going to be incorporating a few different ways of setting up tools. So we're going to have the dynamic tool, dynamic structured tool, and then Wikipedia query run. So this one's built into Langchain. The dynamic structure tool is a way that you can pass in something like a JSON payload. And then the dynamic tool is a simple example. So I'll show you sort of like a foobar example on how you can build a custom tool with that. So next we're going to get our chat OpenAI included. We're going to get OpenAI embeddings included. We're going to get Supabase vector stores included, their client, and then the streaming text response from Vercel's AI library. And then finally, we're going to be using Zob for our schema validation. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to define a few inferences, which will make sense in just a moment here. We're going to set up our environment variables. So we're going to be including our private key and our URL into our application here. Then we're going to set up a post request route. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to destructure a handful of things that we're going to be sending from the front end. So we're going to have our messages, we're going to have the functions that are selected, any files, we're going to have the selected model, and then we're going to have the selected vector storage. So if I just go back to the interface here and refresh, so this selects the model, this is the message, right? Our files are from what's selected in this array here. This is what changes our vector storage. And then finally, this is the functions array. So you sort of see how it all ties in with the backend. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to just handle an example case for Claude 2. So I just put this within here for if you want to begin to get ready for your Claude 2 access, or if you do have access, you can just fill out this logic here and have that condition set. But right now, it's predominantly set up for the OpenAI setup here. So this is just going to simply give you an example response if Claude 2's selected. So when you're actually using the app, just make sure that you have the OpenAI selected. Otherwise, you're just going to continually get this. This is an example of a streaming response from Claude. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to process the data that was sent from the front end, and we're going to be sending base 64 of our files to the back end, and then that's going to be what we parse here and then establish that as readable content in a string. Then we're also going to be getting our latest message, so we're just going to be getting the last message that was sent for what we actually end up sending to our agent. So next we're going to check whether there's any files that were sent over, because that is optional. So this will only run and embed those documents if they are selected. And again, all this is going to be set up now is going to be set up using Supabase, but you could add in a condition similar to a condition for selecting Claude 2. You could say, if it's Supabase, do this. If it's Pinecone, do that. So this is the Supabase implementation. We're just declaring the client. We're mapping through the files. We're putting the files into a vector storage. So one thing to note, actually, if you have very long files and you want to do this, you will need a recursive character splitter just to tie this in. I have a number of videos on Langchain with that you can check out on my channel if you're interested. So then we're going to be calling the OpenAI embeddings endpoint and actually embedding everything. Then we're going to be reaching out and doing a similarity search with our question, and we're going to be specifying that we want 3 results. And then this is what's actually going to be passed to the OpenAI ChatGPT-3 LLM. And we're going to say the user queries this, and then before using prior knowledge, use the following info from the vector results. So next we're just going to be setting up our agent executor with Langchain, and then we're going to be starting to declare some of our tools here. So the first tool that we're going to be running is we're going to be setting up the Wikipedia query tool. So that's a built-in tool. That's one that I included in the Langchain implementation or the JavaScript implementation, I should say. So it's the one I'm most familiar with, which is why I'm using it for demonstration's sake. Now, this is an example of a very simple tool that you could build. So I don't have this in the UI, but just if you want to, create a tool that takes in a string and you can say, okay, what is foo? And it should return you a response with the details that you put in here. So that's how you can establish your own custom tool in Langchain with a simple input and output. Then if you have a more involved tool that has, it takes in a schema of arguments, like in this, it takes in a crypto name and a currency as an optional argument. This is an example on how you can do that. So there's built-in tools, and then there's a couple different ways that you can structure your tools for it to all work within sort of the quote-unquote Langchain way of doing things. So then we're just going to be defining the functions and tools. So this is going to be because we're sending a string in from the backend, and then just to be able to leverage the actual functions. So the function declarations, we're just declaring them here to be able to do that. So it's going to loop through them. If it's active, it's going to push them to the tools array to pass within the agent executor. So here, see, we're going to be passing in the tools that we have selected. We're going to be passing in the model that we're using, and we're going to be passing in the agent. So this can work with GPT 3.5 or GPT-4. And then finally, we're going to be running the executor agent. So we're going to be passing in our argument for the executor, and then we're going to be chunking the results. And then this is just a streaming example. So I'll likely be swapping this out once I dig into the new methods of streaming that are coming out within Langchain. So essentially what this is doing is it's waiting for a string to be responded with from the response, I should say, from the executor, and then it's just emulating that output that you'd typically be familiar with. So there's a bit of randomness on like the length of time between the blocks of characters that come through. And that's pretty much it for the back end. So then for the front end, it's a little bit longer in terms of the amount of code, but it's still not too bad, considering, I don't think anyway. So I kept it very simple, I should mention. So there's 2 files in this. I'd encourage you to break this out if you're looking to build off this, and build like some cool little project with it. I just wanted to keep it within 2 files for simplicity's sake, for people following along within the video. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to declare that this is React for the front end in our Next.js application. We're going to be using the use chat feature from Vercel's AI library for the React implementation. We're going to be destructuring the use state and use effect features from React. So these are all the icons that I'm going to be incorporating into the application. So there's just a handful here from this Phosphor icons library. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to have a simple component selector for actually selecting our component. So that's that top left-hand component. So here you can put in your images like I have here within the public folder. So I have Anthropic, I have OpenAI. And then we're going to handle the click. So if it's selected, we're going to send that back to the parent component just to inform it of what has been selected. And then that will be what's passed as the payload when the handle submit finally gets sent. So pretty simple component. All it's really doing is changing that image and that state in our application. So next, similar component. All this is really doing is just showing that welcome, that first welcome page where we have the welcome back and the Langchain parrot. And then similar to our first component, we're going to have a vector selector. So almost the exact same thing. We're going to just establish our initial state with the Supabase logo. Then we're going to have the icon selections that it loops through as you click them each time. So same thing, it's going to send that message back to the parent component when it's selected, and finally send that payload to our endpoint when we're ready. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to establish our app variable, then we're going to establish a handful of hooks. So I'll just run through these quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a hook for our show welcome back page. So this will control a handful of things like where the input is on the screen. So it will pop down when you're not on the welcome screen. It won't show that initial welcome component. So stuff like that. We have a focus state on whether it is focused. So we're going to use this for, say, if you click on the files and then you click back down to the text area, it's going to collapse that the functions that were toggled up there. We're going to have our file state. So there's a handful of things. I won't go through all of these actually because they're pretty self-explanatory. And I will touch on just this one, however, so this is going to be how we link the front end with the back end. So this name is going to link with the same name that you have with the functions on the back end. But if you don't want to have, say, something like squished together, like camel case or something, there is that label that it shows on the front end. So here is where we're going to be establishing the use chat feature. So this is from Vercel's AI library, which is just awesome. It makes it really easy to handle messages and inputs, and also sending the payloads back and forth from the front end, which we'll get into in this example. So next we're going to be simply handling the vector storage selection. So whether it's Supabase or Pinecone, similar thing for handling the models. So for handle focus, it's like I mentioned, it's going to set the show slide up on whether the functions are there or not, and just handle the focus for us. We're also going to have one to handle blur. So a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just going to run through these. Oh, so the other thing I didn't demonstrate is it does have the Command K feature. So if you go back to the application and you simply click Command K, you have that welcome back or the home screen here. So if you're looking to build on this from here, you know, a cool feature might be having your historic chats here, try and implement that, you know, with Supabase or something else, could be neat. But yeah, you also have that Command K. So I just wanted to demonstrate on how you could do that as well. So next we have our key down handler. So this is to handle, because we're using a text area and not a simple input, it just is going to be listening for our key down to see whether there's the enter key that we press. Next, we're going to have the use effect to show the welcome back message if it's set. Then we have a remove file feature. So this is going to be how we handle just simply removing a file like that. So we have the handle file change event. So this is going to be where we actually set up all that we need to load to be able to convert it to base 64 and get it in a format with all the different options that we're going to be sending back to the back end here. So like the size, the file type, the name, and then the actual encoded file itself. Then next we're going to have our handle icon click here. Okay. So from here, we're going to be going into the actual JSX here. So first, we're going to have our model selector in the top left-hand side. Next, we're going to just show conditionally where that input should be displayed and the messages and all of that. So we're going to have some conditional logic around our Tailwind. So pretty much all the CSS in here is Tailwind classes. So if you're not familiar with Tailwind, that's what all these different classes are. So it can seem a little bit verbose as we go through it, but that's sort of the nature of Tailwind. You have a lot of classes. So if the welcome message state is true, we're going to render that welcome back message. And then for the messages, if there's a length to them, we're going to loop through them here. So we're just going to show if it's user, you can have a custom user avatar. And if it's the AI, I just put the Langchain parrot there and have the output. So you can sort of arrange it, you know, on the left hand, right hand side, that sort of thing. Change out the icons. It's all here for you if you'd like. So next, this is going to be the field set and the form and the text area of where we actually submit to the backend. So within the AI library, so the way that you can pass in other options is, so if you pass in a second argument of options body, and then you can include those things like I have those different variables that we have in those hooks that we're going to be passing. So like our selected model, vector storage, etc. So I'm going to be running through this pretty quick, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me within the comments below. If something's not working, I'm pretty responsive to try and get back to all my comments. I'm pretty diligent about that. So if you have any questions or ideas for that matter of future videos, this was actually an idea inspired by someone in a comment for implementing both OpenAI functions and something with Supabase. So if you have ideas for a video or something you'd like to have boilerplate for, I'm fair game for suggestions. So here is, we're going to be simply showing our slide up. We're going to map through our functions here. We're going to show the function or the list of function names rather. We're going to handle the click on which functions are selected and push those all up into the state for when the form is actually submitted. And then we're also going to have the icons that switch back and forth. So see, we have our circle, and then we have our check circle depending on whether you've checked them or not. So next, here's our text area. So it's a little bit of a beefy text area. Part of the reason why it's set up like this is because it is a text area, it's not an input. And I just wanted to be able to have everything easy to see here. So in your handle submit, again, you have your options, you have all the files, functions, vector storage, etc. And then we're going to be listening specifically for the enter key for this to trigger. Okay, so next we're going to have we're going to be determining, I'm just looking here. So this is going to be where we actually have the icons on the right-hand side here. So we have our function icon, we have our attachment icon, and then depending on the selected model in the top left-hand corner. So say if I click this, you can see that the function icon's disappearing. So that's what this is here. Next, we have an attachment button. So similar thing, but if we, actually, yeah, that's pretty much it, and our attachment button. So, one thing to note with this, so I just set it up to be working with .txt files. If you want to use other document loaders, there's a ton within Langchain. I have videos on how you can incorporate some packages and read stuff like CSVs or PDFs or what have you by using their document loaders. So we have our paperclip icon. So we have our start new chat button. So depending on whether it's welcome back, you'll see there's a different state for our chat start chat button. So if there are files present, we're going to show our vector icon for the Supabase. So for when that panel pops up. So next, this is going to be where we display those files, where we just loop through. Say if there's multiple, this is what it will look like. And then again, there's the icon that you can toggle back and forth. So that's pretty much all this different stuff here. So there's a lot within here because if I look at the files, still working out a couple bugs here around the edges. So if you encounter bugs, make a pull request, open an issue. I'll try and circle back and get these ironed out. So you see things like the actual file size, the file name, and then the file type. So that's why this is a bit longer. And that's pretty much it. So then we also just have that focus state for the commands here. So if you want to have multi-lines or that command K feature, just like it shows in the Claude UI. So that's pretty much it. I know I ran through this fast, but I am going to be including the repo. It's more to have you have a high level understanding on how you can build out an application in Next.js, leverage a ton of cool stuff in Langchain. I'm going to be coming up with a number of different examples in Langchain on different features as they come out on how you can use them. And if there's enough interest, I'll continue to build on this project itself. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see within it, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, if you found this video useful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And otherwise, until the next one.